On December 2018, in Pattaya, Thailand, for 56-year-old George Leece, a holiday meant to be a break from his routine in Lancaster was winding down to an ordinary night. But within hours, that same night would become anything but ordinary. George would wake up in his condo disoriented, his valuables missing, and a bag of unknown pills by his bedside. George Andrew Leece was 56 years old, a resident of Lancaster in the north of England. In December 2018, he traveled to Thailand for what friends later described as a routine holiday, not his first time abroad. He booked a private condominium unit in Pattaya, a coastal city on the Gulf of Thailand known for its crowded beaches and active nightlife. British consular data show thousands of UK tourists visit Pattaya each month, many for short stays like George's. He arrived with several £1,000s in cash and a diamond-encrusted crucifix necklace he often wore. According to his own statement, he spent his days sightseeing and his nights moving between bars and restaurants along Second Road and Beach Road. On the evening of December 15th, after leaving a bar near Soi Buakau, George began walking back toward his condo alone. It was a familiar routine for many visitors, but for George, what happened next would end up in a police file and the local press. As George made his way back to his condo, two local women approached him along the quieter streets of Pattaya. They started talking, and according to George's statement to police, they offered companionship and he agreed to bring them up to his apartment. Surveillance footage later confirmed all three entered the building together. Once inside his condo, George and the two women went up the elevator together. According to his statement to police, George had hoped the night would lead to a romantic three-person activity. Shortly after entering, one of the women left, leaving George alone with the other. He poured himself a drink, attempting to settle into what he thought would be an enjoyable evening. He and the woman exchanged small talk, laughter, and brief conversation about where they had been that night. But almost immediately, George noticed something was off. A sudden, heavy fatigue washed over him. His arms felt like lead, his eyelids heavier with every blink. He tried to focus on the conversation, trying to shake the feeling, but the drowsiness persisted and intensified, clouding his thoughts. George later told investigators that he felt a loss of control over his body, a sensation that began as subtle but quickly became overwhelming. Within moments, he was unable to stay upright. The room blurred around him. Sounds became muffled. He could no longer keep his thoughts straight. And then, everything went black. What had started as an evening George had hoped would be pleasurable ended in complete disorientation. George awoke the next morning feeling groggy, his head pounding and his thoughts sluggish. At first, he struggled to piece together the events of the previous night, the conversation with the woman, the drink, the sudden fatigue. It was as if fragments of memory had been erased, leaving only a hazy recollection of the evening. But as he sat up in bed, the reality of what had happened became painfully clear. His cash, several £1,000s he had brought with him for the holiday, was gone. Alongside it, roughly 3,000 Thai baht he had kept in a small wallet was missing. Most alarming of all, his diamond-encrusted crucifix necklace, an item he wore every day, was no longer on his person or anywhere in the condo. And also his luxury watch, a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, valued at over £5,000, was also missing. On the floor, near where he had been sleeping, was a small plastic bag containing several pills that he did not recognize. The combination of missing valuables and unknown substances left him confused and alarmed. After a few moments of trying to collect himself, he reached for his phone and called the local authorities to report the incident. Pattaya police arrived at his condo later that morning to take a statement. They documented the missing items, photographed the scene, and collected the bag of pills for analysis. Investigators would later note that it was unclear whether the pills had been administered while George was asleep or slipped into his drink. But either way, they raised immediate concern about the potential use of substances to incapacitate him. The police also began to review nearby CCTV footage to track the movements of the women who had accompanied him the night before. As George recounted the night's events to officers, he was visibly shaken, the sense of violation compounded by the uncertainty of what had actually happened while he was unconscious. Following George's report, Pattaya police immediately began to widen the scope of their investigation beyond the condo. Officers reviewed CCTV footage from multiple sources along Second Road, Soi Buakau, and the surrounding streets where George had walked that night, hoping to reconstruct the movements of both women who had accompanied him. Investigators carefully traced the sequence of events leading up to his condo, attempting to determine whether any suspicious behavior could be observed prior to George's loss of consciousness. Within days, their inquiries led them to focus on a 64-year-old Thai woman, later identified as Penjan or Penchan Hales. Police traced her movements to Bangkok, interviewing neighbors and associates to verify her whereabouts. and began building a timeline that might explain her connection to George's theft. During questioning, the suspect denied any involvement in incapacitating George, asserting that the small bag of pills found in his condo belonged to her for personal use. She admitted only to taking a small amount of cash, far less than the several thousand pounds and 3,000 Thai baht reported missing. Meanwhile, authorities recovered George's diamond-encrusted crucifix necklace, one of his most valuable and sentimental possessions, but the remainder of his cash, the Thai baht, and his Rolex watch valued at over 5,000 pounds were never recovered. Police collected additional evidence and continued to analyze the pills found at the scene, sending them to a laboratory to determine their exact composition and potential effect. Each step of the investigation revealed fragments of the night, but large portions remained unclear. Investigators were left with a partial timeline, conflicting statements, and unanswered questions. Had George been drugged intentionally? Were there accomplices involved? And, critically, who had taken the missing cash and luxury watch? The case attracted attention beyond Thailand, making headlines in the UK, as media outlets reported on the vulnerability of tourists and the unusual circumstances of the crime. For George, cooperation with local authorities provided some reassurance, yet it also underscored the uncertainty of the situation. Despite the initial leads and the partial recovery of his property, the exact sequence of events and the full extent of the theft remained a mystery, leaving the case open-ended and unresolved in the public record. With the suspect identified and questioned, investigators turned their attention to the physical evidence left behind in George's condo and the conflicting accounts surrounding it. The recovered diamond-encrusted crucifix necklace was logged as evidence, providing at least one tangible success in the case. Yet the rest of George's valuables, several thousand pounds in cash, 3,000 Thai baht, and his Rolex watch, valued at over 5,000 pounds, were still missing, their whereabouts unknown. Police also focused on the small bag of pills found on the bedroom floor. Laboratory tests were conducted to determine their composition, potency, and potential effects, as one of the central questions of the investigation was whether George had been intentionally drugged. The suspect insisted the pills belonged to her and were for personal use, but investigators could not confirm how or when they might have been administered. Surveillance footage provided some clarity about the movements of the women that night, but there were moments where their activities could not be accounted for, and no cameras captured what occurred inside the condo itself. These unknowns left critical questions. Did George voluntarily ingest the substances, or were they secretly administered? Were there accomplices who removed the missing cash and watch? And could the suspect's story be reconciled with George's recollection of the night? The evidence, while partial, painted a picture of a theft with unusual circumstances, complicated by George's unconsciousness and limited memory of the evening. For investigators, each recovered item, each statement, and each lab result provided pieces of the puzzle, but the case remained clouded by uncertainty, even as headlines in Thailand and the UK reported on the incident. The precise chain of events, the role of the pills, and the total amount of missing property remained unresolved, leaving the investigation hanging between confirmed theft and unanswered questions about the night's true course. George's experience, while unusual in its details, was not entirely unique in Pattaya. The city draws thousands of tourists each month, many from Europe and North America, attracted by its beaches, nightlife, and vibrant street scenes. Alongside legitimate businesses and attractions, authorities have long warned that tourists can be vulnerable to petty theft, scams, and in some cases, more serious crimes. Reports of visitors being drugged or targeted for robbery, while not commonplace, have occurred often enough to merit caution. While his story involved a rare combination of theft, unexplained pills, and unconsciousness, the lessons are universal for anyone traveling abroad. Simple precautions, such as keeping cash and valuables secured, being cautious about inviting strangers into private accommodations, and remaining aware of one's surroundings can make a significant difference. It's also important to trust instinct. If something feels off, it probably island. Authorities and travel advisories emphasize these measures not to alarm tourists, but to provide practical guidance for minimizing risk. If you found this story interesting, this next video is a must-watch.